They insult you. They misunderstand you. They twist your words, mock your calm, question your worth. And in that split second, your mind ignites. 1,000 tiny fires, each whispering, "Defend yourself." But what if you didn't? What if you could watch the storm without needing to control it? What if every insult, every betrayal, every attempt to provoke you was just a test of your inner architecture? The Stoics called it apatheia, not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. They believed freedom begins the moment you realize you cannot be disturbed without your own consent. So the real question is not, why are they doing this to me? But, why do I keep giving them the power to? You can't control the world, but you can control your interpretation. And when you master that, no one can ever make you angry again. They say anger begins where understanding ends. But the Stoic would tell you something different, that anger begins where illusion begins. You are not angry because of what someone said, or did, or took away from you. You are angry because you believe they could. Pause for a moment and look closely. Every emotion that chains you to suffering, resentment, jealousy, outrage, begins with one silent assumption. That person has power over me. That's the illusion Stoicism dismantles, piece by piece, quietly, ruthlessly. Because the truth is almost unbearable to the untrained mind, no one has ever truly hurt you. They only triggered the stories you've been telling yourself. The rest, you did alone. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The Stoic doesn't fight the world, he questions his perception of it. Because what you call reality is not a mirror, it's a lens. And most of us have spent our lives polishing the wrong side of the glass. You see, anger isn't a force, it's a distortion. It bends your perception until you see enemies where there are none, insults where there were only opinions, disrespect where there was simply ignorance. When you're angry, you're not reacting to them. You're reacting to the image of them that your mind has created, the version that fits your wounded narrative. Think about that last time someone said something that pierced your calm. What really happened? Words left their mouth. Sound waves hit your eardrum. And then, your interpretation turned sound into pain. The physical event lasted 1 second. The psychological echo lasted hours, maybe days. You fed it. You replayed it. You believed it mattered. That's perception. The self-inflicted theater of pain. The Stoics were not cold men. They were awake men. They felt deeply, but they saw clearly. To them, emotions were like storms on the sea. You can't stop the storm, but you can stop believing you are the storm. You can observe the waves without drowning in them. You've been told that freedom is doing whatever you want. But the Stoics knew that freedom is not being forced to feel what you don't want. And the moment you stop believing that every perception is true, you begin to build the inner fortress. This is where Stoicism meets psychology. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Stoicism is precisely that, the art of conscious perception. To notice that anger isn't automatic, it's chosen. That insult isn't real, it's interpreted. That peace isn't given, it's remembered. But let's be honest. Detachment sounds noble until you're tested. Until someone betrays your trust. Until your name is dragged through the dirt. Until you're standing there trembling, trying to remember your philosophy while your ego screams for revenge. That's when perception becomes your battlefield. Because the world is full of triggers, and you can't silence them all. You can only silence the one inside you. Epictetus, the slave who became a philosopher, said, "There is only one way to happiness. to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. But that's not a command, it's a diagnosis. He's saying, your suffering is the symptom of misunderstanding what is yours to control. Perception is yours. Interpretation is yours. Reaction is yours. Everything else is noise. Imagine this. Someone spits on you. Literally. The untrained mind burns with rage. How dare they? They disrespected me. But the Stoic mind pauses. They spat. That's a fact. Whether it's disrespect or not, that's my interpretation. I can decide whether this moment poisons my peace or passes like wind. And that choice, right there, that invisible pause, is freedom. The moment between stimulus and response, as Viktor Frankl wrote, is the birthplace of power. Because perception wants you to react. Awareness invites you to see. Perception screams, defend your pride. Awareness whispers, observe your ego. Every moment you practice that pause, you take a step out of the prison cell built by perception. You begin to taste a freedom that no insult, no betrayal, no injustice can take away. Because the truth is, no one can disturb your peace unless you've built your identity out of what they can touch. If your worth depends on approval, rejection becomes fatal. If your power depends on control, chaos becomes unbearable. If your peace depends on fairness, life itself becomes the enemy. The Stoic understood that the only safe foundation is within. You are disturbed not because the world is cruel, but because your peace was hanging outside you, waiting for validation, understanding, apology. That's why Marcus Aurelius said, "It is not the actions of others which trouble us, but our own opinions about them." Your perception is your world. Change it, and you change everything. So here's the paradox. To never be angry again, you must stop demanding that the world be kind. You must stop asking others to change their behavior and start changing your lens. The moment you stop needing reality to match your preference, peace walks back into your life like it never left. You are not here to control perception. You are here to transcend it. The Stoics didn't escape emotion. They saw through its illusion. They realized that peace is not an emotion. Peace is the space beneath them all. And once you find that, no one can touch you. You think you're angry because someone disrespected you. But look deeper, really deeper, and you'll find something else. You're angry because you couldn't make them respect you. You think you're frustrated because someone broke your trust. But the truth is, you're furious because you couldn't stop them from doing it. That's the hidden root of almost every emotional wound. Powerlessness. Anger is how the ego hides it. The Stoics saw this clearly. Epictetus divided the world into two domains: what you can control and what you cannot. Everything outside that boundary, people's thoughts, their choices, their words, belongs to the realm of fate. And yet, this is exactly where most people try to build their lives, in a domain that was never theirs to begin with. That's why you're tired. That's why you're angry. You've been wrestling ghosts. You wake up each morning believing you can control outcomes, that you can control how others perceive you, whether they love you, whether they understand. And every time the world disobeys, you feel betrayed. But the Stoic would smile softly and say, "The world never betrayed you. You betrayed yourself by expecting ownership where you only ever had influence. Control is the mind's drug. It gives you the illusion of safety while secretly tightening the leash around your peace. And the more you try to manage what's not yours, people's emotions, opinions, events, the more you neglect what is yours, your inner state. You've become the custodian of everyone's chaos but your own. And then you wonder why your soul feels heavy. Let me tell you a secret. No one ever loses control. You only lose the illusion that you ever had it. Think about how many times you've replayed a conversation, thinking you could have said something smarter, colder, wiser, as if you could rewrite history by mentally editing your reactions. But you can't. You never could. Because life isn't a film. It's a live performance. And the only thing you truly direct is your presence in the moment. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you accept that, something strange happens. You stop fighting the universe. You start aligning with it. The illusion of control is seductive because it flatters the ego. It whispers, if only they changed, everything would be fine. If only they apologized, I'd be at peace. But that's the oldest trap in human consciousness, the belief that your peace is waiting in someone else's behavior. Stoicism flips the axis completely. It asks you to abandon the external battlefield and move the war within. Because the real enemy is not the event. It's your resistance to it. You don't need to control what happens. You need to control your need to control what happens. That's the inner discipline Marcus called self-command, the sovereign power that cannot be taken, only surrendered. But let's be honest, this is where the philosophy hurts. Because to truly live like a Stoic, you must die to the fantasy that you can manipulate the world into peace. You must look at life and say, do your worst. I am not here to govern you. You must let go completely and yet remain present fully. That is the paradox of Stoicism. Detachment without withdrawal. Serenity without indifference. It's easy to confuse letting go with not caring. But that's not Stoicism. That's numbness. The Stoic feels everything, but obeys nothing. They care deeply, but without possession. They act with precision, but without demand. Their strength is not coldness, it's freedom. When you no longer need life to bend to your will, you become one with it. And in that union, anger dies, because anger cannot survive in acceptance. Seneca once said, "He who is the master of himself is the master of all things." That sounds poetic, until you realize how brutal it is in practice. Because mastering yourself means surrendering the desire to master others. It means giving up your favorite illusion, that you can fix, persuade, or save people who are not ready. That's the hardest liberation of all, walking away not in bitterness, but in peace. Every moment you let someone else's chaos dictate your calm, you trade your freedom for their drama. And Stoicism is the quiet art of refusing that trade. You don't fight for control anymore. You own your surrender. Here's what most people never understand. Control and chaos are twins. The tighter you grip, the more the world resists. The more you demand order, the more disorder you create. Because control is born from fear, and fear always breeds the thing it dreads. The Stoic knows this. He knows that to master life, he must first accept its uncontrollability. That doesn't mean passivity. It means precision, the discipline to act wisely without needing to win, to love without needing to be loved back, to speak truth without needing to be understood, to walk alone without needing applause. That is true control, not over the world, but over the need to control it. So here's the paradox. You stop being angry not when people change, but when you no longer expect them to. You stop being bothered not when life becomes fair, but when you stop needing it to be. That's when calm stops being an effort and becomes your nature. When you finally release the illusion of control, you don't become passive. You become untouchable, because you no longer demand that life obeys you. You simply move in rhythm with it, and in that rhythm, nothing can truly disturb you. You realize the truth Marcus wrote 2,000 years ago. Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. And so, you choose to walk, willingly. Let's be honest. You don't want to be calm. You want to be seen as calm. You don't want peace. You want to win the argument without looking like you tried. You don't want detachment. You want to appear untouchable, while secretly checking if they've noticed your silence. That's the ego's game, to disguise its hunger for validation behind the mask of virtue. Even your pursuit of stoicism can become an act of vanity. You say, "I'm not angry," but your eyes still burn for recognition. You say, "I don't care," but your mind is still drafting imaginary speeches where they finally understand you. You say, "I've moved on," but your peace still depends on whether they know you have. This is the ego that reacts, not because it wants justice, but because it cannot survive indifference. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." It sounds simple, almost naive, but it's the deepest psychological truth ever written. The ego cannot distinguish between being ignored and being annihilated. That's why anger feels like fire. It's the ego screaming, "See me, acknowledge me, don't erase me." You've been taught that anger is a response to disrespect. But look closer. Anger is often just fear wearing armor. Fear of being small. Fear of being invisible. Fear of being powerless in a world that doesn't bow to your story. When someone dismisses you, they're not hurting you. They're exposing your dependence on being validated. That's why Stoicism isn't emotional suppression. It's ego disarmament. Jung called this confrontation shadow work, because beneath your civilized mask, the polite persona, the well-argued calm, there's a hidden child still begging for approval. Every insult that stings, every slight that burns, every betrayal that haunts you, is that child, pounding on the walls of your adult facade, crying, "Don't forget me." And the more you repress it, the louder it gets. That's why Stoicism, misunderstood, becomes dangerous. If you confuse calmness with denial, you turn into a pressure cooker of unacknowledged emotion. That's not Stoic. That's emotional pride. The true Stoic doesn't suppress the ego. He studies it. He looks at it like a scientist looks at fire, understanding its nature so he can master its use. So ask yourself, why do you need to be right so badly? Why does someone's opinion of you hold so much weight in your chest? Why does their ignorance feel like a personal insult? The answer is simple. Because you've built your identity in the reflection of others. The ego has no mirror of its own. It exists only in how it imagines others see it. That's why it reacts. It cannot breathe in silence. It needs friction to prove its existence. The Stoic, on the other hand, walks a different path. He doesn't destroy the ego. He transcends it. He realizes the self that reacts is not the self that observes. He begins to identify not with the wave, but with the ocean. When the insult hits, he feels it, but he knows it's just surface motion. Beneath, he remains unmoved. Think of the last time you were provoked. Someone said something careless, and suddenly, your entire body tensed. That tension was not caused by their words. It was caused by your identity defending itself. "I am not who you think I am." That's the ego's rallying cry. Its desperate attempt to control perception. But here's the truth. You will never control perception. You will only exhaust yourself trying. And every time you react, you reinforce the prison, because reaction is proof that they still hold the key to your state. So the Stoic chooses silence, not because he's weak, but because he refuses to negotiate with illusion. He lets people misunderstand him. He lets them speak. He lets the noise of the world pass through him like wind through leaves. He no longer needs to be seen correctly because he sees himself. The ego always wants to win. But Stoicism is the art of realizing there is nothing to win. The moment you drop the scoreboard, you become unreachable to offense, because nothing external can raise or lower your worth. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. The Stoic understands that every insult is a teacher, every irritation an invitation, every enemy a mirror. You don't need to fight them. They are already revealing your attachments. The moment someone can make you angry, they've found your leash. And that leash, that's your ego's favorite necklace. Cut it. But how? Not by rejecting emotion, but by observing it. When anger rises, don't resist it. Watch it. Name it. Feel where it lives in your body. Notice the thoughts it feeds on. How dare they? They don't respect me. I deserve better. That's your ego's chorus. Don't argue with it. Just listen. The act of awareness already weakens it, because the ego thrives on identification. The moment you see it, you're no longer inside it. This is why Marcus Aurelius spoke to himself in the second person in Meditations. He'd say, "You are angry, but does this serve you?" He practiced self-observation until the ego had no stage left to perform on. And that's your task, too, to become the observer of your reactions until anger becomes irrelevant. Because once you see the ego clearly, its games stop being interesting. You will know you're free when you no longer crave the last word, when silence feels heavier than argument, when your peace no longer depends on justice. That's when you realize they didn't offend you, they revealed you, and that revelation, painful as it is the beginning of liberation. Because the ego that reacts dies the moment you stop feeding it. And from that death, a new self begins to rise. Not the self that performs for the world, but the self that watches the world perform. Smiling, unbothered, free. There comes a point when philosophy stops being words and becomes construction. You've stripped away illusion, control, ego, and what remains is silence. But silence is terrifying when you've spent your life building identity from noise. You used to define yourself by reaction, by who loved you, who betrayed you, who misunderstood you. Now you stand alone, untouched, and the question echoes through your emptiness. Who am I when no one can touch me? That's where the building begins. The Stoic doesn't escape the world. He builds a world inside himself. Not to hide, but to remain unshaken. He becomes a fortress, not against people, but against chaos. Marcus Aurelius called this inner state the citadel of the mind, a place you retreat to not in fear, but in command. He wrote, "Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the hills. But nowhere can a man find a retreat more peaceful or more free from trouble than within his own soul." You can feel the quiet pride in those words, because Marcus was not writing from a monastery. He was the emperor of Rome. He ruled armies, faced betrayal, plague, loss, and yet his calm remained unbroken. How? Because he had built a fortress that existed nowhere outside himself, a space no one could invade. You have that same blueprint within you, but most never build it because it requires solitude, discipline, and self-honesty. You cannot construct peace on foundations of self-deception. The first brick of the fortress is awareness. You must know yourself, completely, brutally. Your desires, your triggers, your attachments, not to judge them, but to place them where they belong, outside the walls. Inside your citadel, nothing enters without your permission. Words may reach your ears, events may shake your circumstances, but they stop at the gate of your perception. You choose what crosses that threshold. That's the essence of Stoic power, selective permeability of the soul. To the modern mind, that sounds impossible, even robotic. But the Stoics weren't unfeeling. They were trained. They practiced emotional architecture the way warriors practice swordsmanship. They didn't aim to suppress the storm. They aimed to stand still in it. Your fortress isn't made of stone. It's made of stillness. The second brick is discipline. Not punishment, not rigidity, but the quiet dignity of self-command. Seneca wrote, "No man is more powerful than he who has himself in his own power." To the Stoic, freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's not being ruled by what you want. Discipline is the muscle of peace. Every time you resist the impulse to react, every time you choose silence over defense, every time you let go instead of clinging, you're strengthening the walls of your citadel. You stop needing to be the loudest in the room. You stop chasing validation like a beggar of attention. You start radiating something rarer: presence. The world feels it. People don't understand it, but they sense it. The unspoken authority of a person who cannot be provoked. That's what the Stoics meant by strength. Not physical dominance, but energetic sovereignty. The quiet kind of power that says, "I don't control you, but you cannot control me." The third brick is acceptance. The recognition that life is not happening to you. It's happening through you. And the moment you resist less, you begin to flow more. Most people waste their lives trying to barricade themselves from fate, forgetting that what resists the current breaks. But the Stoic bends. He allows life to pass through his walls like wind through open gates, because he knows his fortress is not built of control, but of alignment. The Stoic fortress is not rigid. It's alive. It adapts, expands, and breathes. It is strength without hardness, discipline without cruelty, calm without indifference. When the world throws insults, he hears sound. When it throws pain, he feels growth. When it throws loss, he meets transformation. Because everything that enters his world is translated into wisdom. The fourth brick is solitude. Not loneliness, solitude. The deliberate act of standing alone without collapsing. Most people need noise to confirm their existence. Music, chatter, validation, scrolling. Anything to drown the silence that whispers, "Who are you without them?" But solitude is where the fortress takes form. It's where you confront the raw machinery of your mind, the impulses, the stories, the invisible scripts you live by. If you can't sit alone with your own consciousness, you will always be at the mercy of others. Marcus said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be." B1 solitude is where that transformation happens, not in theory, but in presence. That's why Stoicism isn't about isolation from the world. It's about independence within it. It's the ability to walk among the noise and remain unshaken, like a mountain among waves. The fifth brick is love. Yes, love. Because what is the point of invulnerability if it costs your humanity? The Stoic loves the world, not because it obeys him, but because he sees its nature and forgives it. He knows people act from ignorance, not evil, from fear, not malice, from confusion, not clarity. And so his compassion becomes strength. His forgiveness becomes armor. His understanding becomes peace. That's why Marcus, despite being emperor, wrote like a humble man. Whenever you are offended, remind yourself, it is impossible that one should not act according to his opinion he saw through behavior into causes. He didn't excuse, he understood. And understanding is the highest form of love. The true Stoic fortress isn't built against humanity, it's built for it. It's a place from which you can love without losing yourself, help without expecting return, and exist without needing applause. So here you are, standing before your citadel. Its gates open, its walls strong, its heart quiet. You can feel the stillness humming inside you. You finally understand why Marcus called it the only true retreat. Because when you've built this fortress, no insult can breach it, no chaos can invade it, no storm can dismantle it. You realize what the Stoics always knew. Peace is not found in the absence of noise, but in the mastery of it. And once you've built that, you don't just have peace, you are peace.